Welcome back to On the Clock, our show about making the moments matter. I'm your host, Elisa Gums. Today, we're chatting about the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and particularly how these assaults are damaging Black women. Joining us is Dee C. Marshall, the CEO and managing partner of Diverse and Engaged, an award-winning leadership development and DEI consulting practice. Dee, we're so excited to have you here on the Clock. How are you today?
I am doing very well. Excited for this conversation.
Good. I am too. You and I go back a good few years now, but for those of our viewers who are just getting to know you, can you share your professional journey to becoming a DEI thought leader and why you felt called to do this often difficult work?
Wow. Yeah. So, my story starts. I'll give you the short version because certainly we could be here all day. But I started my career on Wall Street. I trained $1 million producers for the top financial services firms. So by trade, training, and development is my background. And when I left Wall Street, I started this company, Raise the Bar. And Raise the Bar was essentially to do really the same thing that I was doing in corporate America. It was training and development. I knew I was called to human development. And the way that sort of played out at the company at the time, my company that I started, Raise the Bar, was we were one part coaching, and then one part training, and then one part events. And when I really started with facilitating and hosting events for women that was targeted, or the focus, I should say, was professional development. And then that sort of lent itself to the coaching that I was doing with professional women in corporate America. But in the work of coaching and training and development and working specifically with women were committed to their own growth and development, building competencies and such. But what I learned is the environment, the culture, the workplace, around these individuals was pushing up against any progress that women were making in their own growth and development. And so that was really, I would say, the invitation and the welcome mat for me as an individual, as a coach, and then as a business owner, to really pay more attention to how do I support women, professional women who are high level, high ranking, and high profile. How do I support them in their workplace? And in the workplace, we had to deal with all of the issues, macroaggressions, microaggressions, workplace culture that way back when there wasn't as much conversation and honesty about the environment. It was more build competency. So, in short, that's really part of the journey of coming from corporate America, starting my own company, Raise the Bar, and then growing and evolving the company over some time. When I started Raise the Bar, we were I would say 80% was B2C and 20% of our business was B2B, right? And then I was working with a financial services firm, and they said, you really should lean in more here to this diversity work. The work that we were doing at the time was helping women not only develop themselves but position themselves for higher roles, and also we were helping the companies identify and source diverse talent. So again, that was the second sort of nugget in this diversity journey. And from there, probably back in 2018, I decided to restructure, rebrand, and relaunch the company that was Raise the Bar. We became Diverse and Engaged. And I made an intentional effort to restructure. So then we were 80% B2B, 20% B2C. And the work that we set out to do back in 2018 under the new company, Diverse and Engage, was essentially working inside of organizations to look at the workplace culture and the environment. And that is when we, really went full on and became Diverse and Engaged. And who we are today, we are or what we like to say, we speak two languages, training and development and DEI. And our clients, they retain us when they recognize the issue that they have, attracting, engaging, and retaining inclusive culture. So that is really the work. Our clients are Fortune 10 across tech and CPG, and it's exciting work. So that is the long, short story of us in the diversity space long before it became popular. And I'm grateful for that. But really, from a place of how do I support professional women, and now, of course, it's expanded to professionals in corporate.
Yeah. And I know even outside of diverse and engaged, you do a lot of things on other platforms in the diversity space. Tell us about some of that work.
Yeah, so a few things. I would say one of the I would say one of the strategic plays and the strategic relationships, and even our unique serving proposition is really in the political space. In other words, we have some strategic, I would say, clients and some strategic relationships in that we worked with members of Congress specifically on strategy around race and, race and equity, racial equality. Why do we do that work? Because it connects to the work that we're doing for women in corporate and people in corporate America, in addition to working with members of Congress on racial equity. We have, in terms of leadership development, provided training and development coaching for women state senators. I have also had the privilege of coaching the First Lady of Bermuda. So this again is all in this other space that is not the private sector, but it is in the work of public sector, government to some extent, and all of that again aligns to the corporate side. Another space is we have. I would say strategic client with one of the top civil rights social justice organizations. And so the work that we do with in civil rights and social justice is we have the privilege of working with an organization who leads in advocacy for Black women. So what do we do with them and for them? So we advise. We are the senior advisor on DEI, and that is. It's super meaningful. It's close to my heart to be on watch for what's happening with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion as let me start again. So it is important to us, and it aligns in terms of the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion and how that impacts Black women. So these are just some outliers that are very strategic because they help to inform the work that we are doing inside of corporations. It helps us to add value to women, professional women. I'll say this, and I'm super passionate about women in corporate America and in high level and high ranking and high profile positions need air cover. And what my relationships that are connected to Capitol Hill, whether it's, House of Representatives or civil rights and social justice organizations, that work really helps me to be a connector of sorts. So when women on the private sector side and corporate are having challenges, it's helpful to have friends on Capitol Hill. It's helpful to know people who are the people who are empowered to challenge and push the envelope and hold corporations accountable, right? So that social justice relationship, it's helpful for me to slip a note and say, hey, there's some interesting things that are happening here in this space, and maybe there's a way for you to get involved, maybe there's a way for you to support, maybe there's a way for you to advocate, or maybe there's a way for you to help solve or help help resolve something. So those are two of the relationships that I have that, again, I maintain those to help us. I'm gonna be just quite honest. I maintain those relationships to help Black women. Okay, while we do work at Diverse and Engage for all people, we do. But my heart as a Black woman is for Black women, and the air cover, the advocacy that we need to be able to connect the dots. So there's that. And then the last thing that I would say is I sit on the board of directors for WeBank, which is the Women Business Enterprise National Council, the largest third party certifying body for business owners, for small business owners. And that's unusual for me as a business owner, a Black woman, to sit on a board that is, I would say, more than half, probably 75% of the board is with corporate executives. They are the Fortune 500. But for me to grow, the business to such a place where I would be elected to the board, it's meaningful for me because I know representation matters. It's meaningful for me because it says that I get to advocate for us as business owners, not just us in the workforce. And I get to support other women business owners to say, hey, girl, you could do this, and you could scale, and you could go big. And listen, we need to be at the table. We need to bring the table to the table, because if we're not at the table, we are on the menu. So that is the third sort of outlier that I would say that is so very strategic in terms of the way that I've gone about building, growing, and scaling diverse and engaged.
Yeah. Over the last few years, we've been on a roller coaster with DEI in this country since what you call the diversity tipping point. As someone who is deeply entrenched in the space, what are you seeing now?
Yeah. So, right now, I would say with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, we are at DEI 4.0. 4.0, I describe as the anti DEI movement. It is the reversity of, I would say, and I'm sure, we've all heard this, it's the biggest pushback against 50 years of Black progress. That is where we are right now as a result of affirmative action being overturned. So, once that happened, although affirmative action being overturned did not apply to anything other than higher ed, it really left a welcome mat, or it put out a welcome mat to say anything and everything that is to course correct years, of systemic racism, any programs, any activities, any initiatives, any events. It really said, we're going to do away with that, right? Or that's what the case intended to do. It intended to, put out the welcome mat to say, you could challenge everything now. Now that we have, struck down affirmative action in higher ed, this is the opportune time for anyone who is not on board with diversity, equity, and inclusion to challenge it with the MBDA. From minority owned business, you could challenge it in the workforce. So essentially where we are seeing the reversity, the anti movement, that, or where DEI has been highly politicized. It is a complicated political tool that has been weaponized against the very people that it is intended to help, to support. And, I would say, yesterday I was working on a report. It's called the DEI watch list. And we were reporting out there have been across more than 30 states where anti DEI bills have either been introduced, enacted, or passed in the current legislative session. So, sidebar, remember I mentioned the relationship that I have Capitol Hill. This is why. Do you see now? And I'm going to say a sidebar to the sidebar. This is the window and the time when I think for Black women, um, we have to be very strategic. We have to no longer work in silos. We need relationships across industry and sector. We need to lean into politically to the people who you voted in office locally. They need to know our name and we need to know their name. We need to know what issues they're working on and they need to know the issues that we are challenged with. Okay. But do you see? So let me come back from this double click sidebar, but I'm now connecting the dots. Do you now see how here is where we have to play a different game? So I'll pause there in terms of, but the current state of DEI, that is at the 30,000 foot view, even before we get down to, well, what does this look like for Black women and how is this impacting Black women? Let's just first level set where we are, different from DEI 3.0 that prioritized race and culture, right? And DNI 3.0 um, began at the diversity tipping point. Remember, we were amid a global reckoning of racism against Black people. It was global because people protested all around the planet, and it was specifically Black people as a result of the death of course, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many more. And so, corporate America, remember, for the very first time, acknowledged, oh my God, Black lives, air quotes, do matter. We had no idea we're anti racist. So that was DEI 3.0, prioritizing Black. Before then, you could barely say Black in corporate America, except for the Black Employee Network. Before that, you were minority, you were diverse, you were anything else. You really couldn't, you didn't have the freedom and the luxury to talk about anything Black except for the Black Employee Network. Okay? DEI 2.0 was gender diversity. The movement was hashtag Me Too. DEI is movement based. There's a trigger, something happens, and then we react. So DEI 2.0 was hashtag Me Too. It largely prioritized women, but who were the beneficiaries? White women. And so now we know DEI 2.0, then there was 3.0, and now we're in the space of 4.0, where I'll say this and I'll pause. DEI is no longer this thing or this idea, concept, movement, initiative that belongs to corporate America, belongs to CDOs, chief diversity officers. No. At 4.0, it no longer is the chief diversity officer's responsibility. It's no longer self-contained or contained in workplace. It is politicized. It is where the opposition has found the money trail. And the chief legal officer, legal owns this now in corporate America. CDOs don't necessarily own diversity anymore because corporations have been pressure tested and legal counsel is advising corporations on what to do and not do, um, to avoid legal litigation, right? So, I mean, I could go on, but that's just the broad strokes. That's a 30,000 foot view. Is
Yes,
that
yes.
helpful? Does that make sense, my
It
friend?
is. It is absolutely. And thank you so much for laying that out for us in that way, because now we can go in as you were connecting the dots. The next thing I wanted to ask you was that I know those of you working in the DEI space are not a monolith and there's never just one path forward. But if you could share sort of some of that inside conversation on what the prevailing sentiment is for how we hold the line, because it feels like all of these hard won gains that we've been seeing are being erased.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's such a good question, and I do think that's the conversation to be had. I don't believe we hold on to what was. To some extent, I do believe uh, we do need to recalibrate. We do need to, give a pass. A pass, a PAS is a positive asset search, right? What have we accomplished? What has been done in the last season that we can celebrate? And then I believe we deliver on what the commitments were and then expand. right? We expand, right? And we strategically, here's what I believe is the path forward. So in that recalibration, it's always celebrating, not backpedaling. Sidebar, some corporations were attempting to redact their statements at the diversity tipping point, which is not a good thing to do. It's they wanting to wipe from the record, because that acknowledgement that we are anti-racist, it means that we acknowledge that there is racism, and that acknowledgement helps us to move forward with course correcting, because any work around diversity, equity, and inclusion per the EOC is that it has to be course corrective, right, to some sort of systemic barrier. So when companies try to retract the statement to say we're anti-racist, what they're attempting to do is get around. But nonetheless, I will say the path forward, you're right. There is a relinquishing control, so to speak, or relinquishing, giving up, like surrender, right? There is this surrender that you can't say it's done. We need to do something different. I say holding the line looks like the work. It looks like, what is it that we really need to do to address systemic barriers, and do the work, and maybe not be so attached to the language, right? That is where you have to play, and you have to play and win at a game that somebody else has set up for you, right? But if we hold on to the past, then we're not going to be able to position ourselves for the win. So I say, stay committed to the work, but what are the how do we manage around the rules, and the perceived rules, right? And the perceived rules of the game, if there's no funding, if there's no prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, then we have to attach to the things that are meaningful. And that is, how do we compete in a global economy, right? That's sort of a hook to attach the work, right? Needing to be diverse in many ways to compete and win in a global economy. So talking about now going back to the business case, where we had come out of talking about the business case, right? Top CEOs in corporate would say, no, this is the right thing to do, right? That was DEI 3.0. It's the right thing to do. DEI 2.0, and before that, it was, what's the business case? So now at 4.0, okay, how are we going to compete globally, right? And also, you know, 50%, or let's just say the largest domestic emerging market is 51% people of color. Okay. So this is number two. So, right. So it's the path forward is hooking on to another anchor. And that is, well, how are we going to engage consumers and employers, workforce? How then do we manage around 51%, right? How do we manage around millennials, let's see, Gen Y, Z, Gen Y is the largest and most diverse generation. And so then how do you manage workforce talent? How do you manage innovation? So the path forward has to, I think, begin in a place that isn't often comfortable for us. And that is just making the business case, going back to that versus it's the right thing to do. And I think a lot of us, I'll say me as well, we're now in our emotions, rightfully so. There's been such a disregard, a disrespect. It is painful. And I admit it. For me, for many years, I was able to be in this role, do the work, and overlook and still work through macro, microaggressions, disregard, pay inequities. I was able to do it because I know what we're dealing with. But as of last year, it just, there is a trigger, right? For us all. So let me come back and say, so the path forward is the rules of the game. Right. And we know that DEI was attached to a funding source of the money. If you just follow the money, I'm going to go sidebar again here. You know, CRT evolved to DEI. Why? Because CRT wasn't a strong enough case for the opposition to say we are not here for Black people or historically underrepresented people, right? The erasure of Black history wasn't attached to a money line. And because we are on the clock, and I know what you all do over there in terms of wealth and money and financial
Yes.
and
Yeah.
economic empowerment, we should
Yeah.
talk about this, right? This is what you all do at Black Enterprise, right? Follow the money. There was no funding source attached to CRT. There is no funding source attached to the erasure of Black history. So what the opposition learned is, oh, in the budget, in the in it, for everybody who's not watching, the line item, there is money in DEI. And that is how this has evolved. So, again, the path forward is we just have to learn a different game, the different angles, a different understanding, which is why locating ourselves in this is necessary. And so it's changing the lens and the language,
Yep.
changing the lens and the language. So let me pause here. I've said a lot, and I hope it's helpful because I
It
feel
is.
like I just feel like there's so much more. We if there was a such thing as this season, this is a sidebar. Everybody listening, watching, there's a sidebar to the sidebar to the sidebar. I feel
I
like
think we've lost track of
we
what
lost.
sidebar we're on.
And now we just know this is my, I know I'm following the conversation and I know I'm way over here left, but let me just say this because I know you all will identify with this. I think for us as Black women and black people, but Black women in particular, we just need a timeout, a sabbatical and at the sabbatical is a cry room. If there's a cry room in a sabbatical, we need to process. Okay. We need to talk through, the last year or so, right? The trigger and the traumas. And then we need to celebrate. We need to celebrate each other. Girl, look what you have been able to do, at least in the 5 years. Look at Black Enterprise. Look at the partners. Like, we're going to celebrate them. Nope. We're going to celebrate the ones that said yes. And this window of opportunity that it allowed us to do this, right? That's what we need. Okay. I'm still in the sidebar in the sabbatical. And then, baby, we need strategy. We need strategy. We need to expand our network. And Black women need air cover. I'm a free agent, right? As a CEO and managing partner, I'm a free agent. So I'm the one that, and I thank God for it, I'm a strategic bridge here. Girl, what's happening? Okay, we're going to strategize. So I'm going to come back from the sidebar, but I feel like that's what we need. We need this room and this sabbatical. I think we were given a lifeline in the last month that gave us a bit of hope, right? Otherwise, we would be down for the count right now. We'd be down.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that. I was going to ask you about Black women because I was going to say, I have felt this backlash intensely and it's felt very personal at times. But I think that you hit on that already. We have all felt that because the attacks on them are really the attacks on us. And we need to acknowledge that. And sometimes, like you said, cry about that because it has been rough. But you gave us some tips for a path forward. So I'm going to turn to our new lifeline because the most high profile instances of these attacks have been on Kamala Harris, who's been called the DEI candidate, the DEI vice president, and a DEI hire. So can you talk about some of the ways that this backlash against DEI is showing up in the election and how the fact that it's now part of the national discourse is emboldening people to pursue these anti-DEI efforts in the workplace?
Yeah. No, I think it's a good question. And I will share, I have a personal thought, but I like to, I'm a consumer and curator of Gen Pop, right? So I'm always watching. In fact, our research team at Diversity Engage, we pay attention to general population, right, in the public domain and how things are landing. And I leave space and I'm open for new thoughts and insights and ways to process. And I will say that it is unfortunate that DEI has now been weaponized and rebranded. It went from diversity, equity, and inclusion in a business matter to being a political weapon at 4.0. And then as of the collapse, the bridge collapse, a while back in Maryland, it began the blatant, I would say, rebranding of the N word, DEI being, exchanged for when the opposition wants to really insert N word. And so it now means to some people, Black folks. It was code before. I will say another painful thing that I think we've all experienced is how terms of endearment for us have been weaponized against us. So things like culture and woke, and which really, um, we are the curators of much. We set standards and trends and culture. We embrace. Listen, we are the most resilient human beings on the planet. Okay, Black people, our ancestors, are the most resilient to be able to endure with little, with nothing. The journey and then the endurance over time to be able to build a country. I mean, look, I'm going to come out of that, but I will say this. So the DEI, the label and language is just so super unfortunate. I'll tell you what I have heard that I like. I like that some folks are resisting and saying, no, I'm not a DEI hire. And I think that is and was appropriate frame in business and in corporate. It's like, oh, no, I wasn't, right? It was based on, based on competencies, based on skill, tech. I 100% believe that. But I have also heard our Black brothers and sisters say, yeah, no, I was a DEI hire. And so using the term and in a positive and flipping it, because I believe now this is a matter of owning our power and not allowing this cultural appropriation for the opposition to steal what has been near and dear, right? And I think you even asked that question earlier about holding the line, because some of us relinquishing, DEI, whether it is specific programs, initiatives, partnerships, it's the language, right? We're now following suit. Like, okay, well, it's not diversity and inclusion. Well, no, maybe it still is. It still is. No, I'm going to share. And so, to come back to what we're seeing with respect to Vice President Kamala Harris, I think it's, and I'll say it like this: the question became, her partner is the DEI hire. Is he the DEI hire, or is she the DEI hire? Right? No, seriously. And I
Yes.
said, that yes, it yes or yes, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing. So I am now in the position of one part holding the line. You could still say it, it's not a bad word, but if there's an appropriate way for us to hold the line, to educate and take our power back, have it be what you need it to be, and you get to tell the story. Because again, I've heard both sides. No, I'm not a DEI hire. And then I've heard a sister friend, highest ranking Black and female in an organization, she said, yeah, I am. Yes. But what she was essentially doing is taking the power back and owning it. And then I think it's appropriate to ask the question, well, in this scenario where you have the highest ranking as a Black female, and then the second as a white male counterpart, they seem like an awesome team. Who was the DEI hire? It's wherever there is a compliment. So I am leaving space and open to the DEI hire. And also, I'm going to state the obvious. I don't know that it needs to be stated. Of course, she's not the DEI hire when her credentials are stacked. Her credentials are stacked. She is not, she being the vice president, is in no way, shape, or form a DEI hire. She earned every step of the way. There is a paper trail, there are receipts, there are credentials, there is impact, there is work. And so I think in those instances, we can respond, no, here's my credentials, here's my work, here's my hard skills, technical skills. Not that you need to defend it, but I just say that.
And so,
Yeah.
what would you say to those of us in terms of advice on how to navigate it when we have these situations where our experience is not recognized and people are trying to undermine us under the cloak of we're a DEI hire?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's I could say a few things about this. So I do think it is our opportunity, not just responsibility, but our opportunity to stand anchored and flat footed if we've decided to stay within an organization and to have the conversation, the difficult conversation. So to educate as to, you know, whatever is the frame, it's our responsibility to be as informed, as educated about workplace culture, about the potential challenge to the business as it pertains to this, the challenge to competing in a global marketplace, the challenge of staying relevant. I do think that it is unfortunately our responsibility. I know sometimes it's overwhelming and all consuming to have to be that person, but the alternative that I'm always holding folks to is we have the decision to make as to whether or not we give our talent and our genius to organizations that don't value us, right? And so we have a decision to make to stay or to go. But if you stay, yes, there will be a difficult time in always having to often remind the people from a number of different angles in terms of risk to psychological safety, right? So there's a conversation to be had about psychological safety, reputational risk, um, as well as the business, right? So I gave the business side, but I would also say on the people side, reminding the leadership about the risk of talent, innovation revenue, and all the things they already know. I think sometimes, a lot of times, there is not just racism that exists, there is a blind spot of just not knowing. It's just a blind spot. If you are of a different persuasion, you have the luxury to live in your own world and just not see Black women or Black people, and or to pretend that you don't see us, right? So, listen, I don't even know if I answered the question, but I would say, listen, but I will say, I would say this. I think Black women, I think we have the opportunity now with what's getting ready to happen to be part of redefining what the next stage will look like. Because we're going to do a quick U-turn. We're going to be at 5.0 immediately. I'm gonna say, well, you know what? No, I take that back. 5.0 is within arm's reach, but it depends on two other branches of government. And for Black women, there is going to be an opportunity, a window of opportunity in the 119th Congress session for Black women to now get beyond our day to day and what we're doing and really to lean in and to be part of the solution, to be part of giving insight about what is happening and what needs to happen. In fact, I'm working with, in my home state, the senator to look at how we move from a defensive strategy on this anti DEI movement to offensive strategy. We are in the process of rewriting language, right? Because we know that there have been language given, access, engagement, and opportunity, but we are rewriting. We are in the position of rewriting and connecting with the local officials to make a request, to put forward an ask. And so as we wrap, I'm going to say that's an opportunity for Black women. And the Black women in corporate and business, which wherever you are, higher ed, healthcare, that is your and one. Your plus one now needs to be some sort of political um, engagement, if you will, some political leaning in to leverage your voice for good. using your voice for good. So I hope it's helpful. I do this work of advocating for, women all over, but Black women all the time. So once you get me talking about us, it's always going to be us. I didn't even talk about Bo. I'm a member of, the top 1% of Black women business owners, but I think you get it. You know my heart, Elisa. I know that's why you invited me. And I'm just believing something out of this conversation.
Yes.
You were able to take something away.
Yes, ma'am. I would say that this has been so thought-provoking, and I want to thank you, Dee, for laying out the landscape for us, for connecting some of the dots, and for sharing the unique ways you're helping us make the most of the time we have by ceaselessly championing the inclusion and advancement of women, and particularly Black women. And thank you all for watching On the Clock. We'll see you next time as we continue to talk about working with purpose and living with passion.